All right, it's good evening. It's good to have you all this here with us tonight. We're going to start off singing number 381, and we'll sing the first and last verse of 381. Let's sing. Years spent in vanity and pride, caring not my Lord was crucified, knowing that it was for he died on Calvary. Mercy there was great, grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my soul found liberty at Calvary. Oh, the love that drew salvation's plan. Oh, the grace that brought it down to man. Oh, the mighty gulf that God did span at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Number 417. Sing the first and last verse of this song, and then we'll have our message. 417. Sweet are the promises, kind is the word. Here my message man ever heard. Pure was the mind of Christ, sinless I see. He the great example is in heaven for me. Where he's a follow, follow Jesus every day. Listen to his loving words, come unto me. We will promises, faithful and sure. Lean upon the Savior, and thy soul is secure. Ways are followed, ways are followed, ways are followed. Follow Jesus every day.
Sorry, I'm trying out Chris's fancy little NSYNC boy band microphone here. Hey, good evening. So thank you for being out tonight. Thanks for coming. I know Wednesdays are tough. Lots of other places we could be, so I really do appreciate everybody being here tonight. I know it's not easy, especially if you worked all day, to go to one more place, but I really am glad y'all are here tonight. So I'll be honest, I forgot that I was supposed to bring the message tonight until we were in line at Zaxby's. So I was like, okay, everybody be quiet. I got to come up with something pretty quick. So one thing that I have focused on, so this is my 6th year teaching. One big focus for me has been the social, emotional well-being of my kids. Academics are there for sure, but I'm more concerned with how they're doing socially, how they're growing, especially in middle school. So think back to your middle school years, and I guarantee you most of you can probably roll your eyes and think, I'm glad I don't have to do that again. The most common thing I get when I say teach middle school is, oh, bless your heart, and what's wrong with you? I get that a lot too. What's wrong with you? So I've been reading a book, and this all ties together, so bear with me. The book I was reading, it's navigating this generation. And the big issue is, and it's something you hear about a lot in school, and you teachers, I know you hear it a lot, it's about the anxiety levels of these kids. These kids from ages about 12, 7th grade, up until their 20s, have the highest levels of anxiety of any other generation ever. Ever. We're talking even World War II. We're talking Vietnam. We're talking all these generations. These kids have more anxiety, more stress than any of these other generations, almost combined. It's unbelievable the amount of stress they have. And so that's got me really thinking this year and focusing on trying my best to help these kids navigate that a little bit and learn a little science on the side. But what got me thinking is when, especially for some of us older people, when we were young, our circle of influence was the classroom, where you had, any 20 to 30 kids in your classroom, maybe a few more in the lunchroom. But then when you got home, your circle of influence was the people who lived in your immediate vicinity within a bike ride. It's probably safe to say. So you're talking maybe at the most, your group of influence might have been, 50 people would probably be putting it high if we're being honest. That was who we had to impress. That's who we had to worry about. That's who we had to see on a daily basis. That's who we had to deal with issues and fights, whatever. Well, these kids today, they come home and their circle of influence is in the hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. Because of this. Hundreds of thousands of people. We had to worry about Billy next door and Susie over there. They've got to worry about 10,000 people that follow them on Instagram and are critiquing everything they post. It's real. It's real. For us adults, we might look at it and think it's silly. It's not silly. I can see it in my kids' faces every day. I had my kids, this is leading to our lesson right now. I had my kids yesterday. I just kind of took a break from teaching for a minute, and I said, you know what? Because they're just, you can see it on them. I said, all right, take out a piece of paper, and I said, I want you to write down what's keeping you from being the best version of you. What's keeping you from being the best version of you? And I said, you can be as honest as you want. I'm the only one that's going to see them. I'm not going to share them. I'm not going to read them out. I'm curious. What's keeping you from being the best version? I did this with every class. And let me tell you, some of the stuff, of course, school, ELA, English got written down, math. Nobody likes math. Sorry. Nobody really likes ELA either. Sorry. But then some of the things these kids were sharing with me was heartbreaking. I told them they didn't have to put their names on them, but I got everything from my mom and dad always yell at me when I try to talk to them. fear, people not liking me, fear of trying to fit in, fear that I got a couple of fear I'm not being a good Christian. I know I should be. But I mean, I got so many anxiety, worried related things. Now, once again, as an adult, it's super easy to look at and say, oh my goodness, you're in 7th grade, you'll get over it. Yeah, but the trick is to them, it's real. That's what they're going through. So I can't stand, I'll be honest, I get mad at adults when they brush off kids when they say stuff like that. Because I'm like, you know what? It's real for them. Yeah, in my head, do I know they're going to get over this crush? Do I know? I do. But for that kid in that moment, it's real. So what all this led up to is it got me thinking for tonight is what's keeping us from being the best Christians that we can be? What's holding us back? So in the car, I had the boys help me. We wrote down a few words and see if any of these resonate with you. Anxiety, fear, laziness. I saw laziness a lot of my kids. I was surprised to see they were brave enough to write that down. I got several. I'm lazy. I know I'm lazy. ADD, just can't focus. Procrastination. Is it family? Is it friends? Depression. Confidence. Anger. Desires. And possessions. These are some of the words that we kind of thought of just driving here. Are these keeping us from being the best Christians we can be? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, I'd almost guarantee that we all fall into one of those, myself included. So then we got to thinking, well, what about Bible stories? How can we all tie this in? How can we relate this? So we started thinking about stories. And so number one we thought about was Jonah. What really kept Jonah from going to Nineveh? God told him to go. God told him, hey, these people need to hear it. What kept Jonah from going to Nineveh? What was it? Leonard. Hatred. I have anger. He hated the Ninevite. He hated them. Anger. Anger kept him from being the best disciple for Christ that he could be. Anger kept him from doing that. How about Samson? Story of Samson. What kept Samson from being the best that he could be? I mean, he was a judge. He was smart. I mean, strength, smart. I mean, what kept Samson from being the best he could be? Somebody besides Leonard. Sorry, Leonard. What kept Samson from being the best that he could be, Ben? Love. Did we put? Yeah, desires. We put desires down. Love. Desires kept him from being the best that he could be. The rich young ruler. What kept him from being the best? Because if you remember when he's talking, man, teacher, I've done all these things since I was a child. I know the scriptures. I know the customs. I know all this. I've got all this done. What kept that rich young ruler from being the best that he could be? What was it? Yeah, possessions. His possessions. His possessions kept him from being even closer to God. How about Eve? This was a good one. We had a little fight about this one in the truck. Eve, Adam and Eve. What kept Eve from being the best that she could be? What did you say? Impatient. I didn't think about that. That was good. What did you say, bro? Jealousy. Why jealousy? Why'd you say jealousy? Okay, she wanted to be like God. And so a little jealousy, a little impatience on her part. More might have been revealed to her, but she was impatient, and so that jealousy kicked in. How about Judas? I mean, good grief. Jesus personally chose Judas, chose him. You'd think, okay, that's an easy one. But what kept Judas from being the best he could be? Greed. 100% greed. Greed, possessions, greed. And the last one that we came up with, how about Cain? Cain and Abel. What kept him from being the best? I mean, my goodness, there weren't that many of them. I mean, jealousy. Yeah. So we see all these things, especially in the Bible, stories in the Bible of people who could have been the best, who had every opportunity. The Judas, I mean, good grief. Jesus picked him. And Judas still had that lust for money, that greed in him that kept him from being the best he could be. So I guess my challenge for you guys tonight is and I'm including myself in this, what's keeping us from not only being our best self, but what's keeping us from being the best Christian we can be? And this is hard to do. This is hard because you have to be honest with yourself. And we don't like to be honest with ourselves. We don't. You don't like to look in the mirror and admit we have faults. We don't want to look at ourselves and say, you know what, I could have done that a little better. Or, hey, I really messed that up. Or I should have done. That's hard. We don't like having those conversations with ourselves. So that's what I will leave you guys with tonight is focus, pray, get lost in the Bible. But what's keeping us? What's hindering us from being the best Christian we can be and the best person we can be? What's holding us back? And as always, with that, we always like to offer the invitation for anybody. Because listen, we've all messed up. We all mess up constantly. My quote of the day that I had for my kids that I do every day today was, what makes a good person good? It's when they do something bad, but they own up to it. They admit it. They take responsibility for it. Not that they're always good, but they mess up. Listen, we all mess up. We messed up today. I guarantee you I failed God a dozen different ways today. I'm sure I have. But since I've been baptized into Christ, I know that I have the forgiveness of my sins. So if you have anything at all, we can pray for you for anything. If you're struggling with your faith, if you're struggling with who you are in Christ, if you're struggling with who you are at all, please let your needs be known as we stand and sing.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? No turning back, no turning back.
Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that you've given us. Father, thank you for us being able to come here this evening, to spend time with one another, to worship you, to come before you with our prayers and to learn more about you, Father. We thank you for all the blessings that you've given us, each other, and our families, those that we're around each day. Father, for our homes and our transportation and this building and just all your many blessings, Father. Please help us, each one of us, to be better Christians, better family members, better friends. Father, whether we're students or workers or whatever other roles we fill, help us to do our best. Give us the abilities that you can. Father, be with those that are sick, those that may be sad or lonely, those that can't get out and do the things that they wish they could do. Father, be with those that are caring for loved ones, especially be with those that have lost loved ones, Father. Father, be with our country and our world. Father, help us to remember that you're in charge. We're but a small piece, but we need to be doing as much to help your will as we can. Father, be with our congregation. Be with those that lead, those that serve, those that support. Be with the members that are here every time. Be with those that may not be here every time. Help us to be encouraging to them. Help us to bring them together and ask what we can do, pray for them, whatever we can do, Father, to help each other to get to heaven. Help us to have a good rest of the week, good rest of our lives. Help us to bring someone to heaven with us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
All right, there we go. Let's get started. Our time is short. I have 20-ish minutes. I'm going 25. I told Derek Dalton, I said, when the kids downstairs get done at 7:45, just send them out. Let them go wherever they need to, because then we'll know it's time to stop. So that's how we're going to do it. So anyway, we are going to continue talking about Joshua tonight. And so I will direct your attention there. We're going to talk about chapter 3. And when you do Joshua chapter 3, what you notice is chapter 4 They go together. It's I guess a part one, part two, wherever the division is, of the same story. So a beginning and an ending of the same story. So we probably won't make it quite to chapter 4 tonight. We'll get through chapter 3 for a little bit, hopefully. So let's start walking through Joshua chapter 3. And I do want to read through it. If you want to just read along real quick, it's only 17 verses. It won't take but a second. That way we're all familiar with what we're going to talk about. And we'll kind of talk about certain portions of that. Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. They came to the Jordan. He and all the people of Israel lodged there before they passed over. And at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, talking about the Ark of the Covenant, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing before you into the Jordan. Now, therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the ark were dipped into the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the time of harvest, in parentheses, the waters coming down from above stood and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down toward the sea of Arabeth, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now, the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until the nation finished passing over the Jordan. All right, so that is chapter 3. Now, what do we want to talk about? A couple things I want to talk about. We're going to talk about the Ark of the Covenant. We're going to talk about the parting of the waters. And then as you get into chapter 4, we start talking about the memorial stones, and that's pretty cool too. First thing I want to talk about, though, is the 3 days. Okay? In chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, a period of 3 days is mentioned. And so the question is, let me say this. The problem is, for somebody like me, this is something I could get hung up on for like hours and days and discuss it and dig into it. I'm not going to do that to you. But I do want to at least kind of skim the surface because I think it is important. Because when you read this, you're like, well, which 3 days is it? So when you look in chapter 1, verse 10 and 11, Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp, command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan. This Jordan. Remember that. Then we get into chapter 2. We talked about this last week. She said to them, that's Rahab, go to the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there for 3 days. And then we find out in verse 22 that they actually did. They went and hid in the hills for 3 days. Probably farther to the west, and then they came back, past Jericho, then the 10-mile distance back over to Shittim, back across the Jordan. And then what we just read in chapter 3, verse 2, at the end of 3 days, the officers went to the camp. And right before that, it says Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. So, what are the 3 days? When are these 3 days? Are there 3 days? Are there 6 days? Are there 9 days? Here's what I came up with. You can agree or disagree. Again, this is something you could get hung up on and talk about it for days. People have written articles and articles and pages about this. But it's one of those things that in the end, you kind of come to the conclusions like, it's probably all right. The thing is you got an over 3,000-year-old narrative, right? And the way I took this and kind of what I came up with the idea that, first of all, it said within 3 days, you're to pass over this Jordan. And then we find out in chapter 3, Joshua is leaving Shittim. You've probably watched a movie or a show or something where it starts kind of in the middle. A show that I recently watched on Netflix, the very first episode, it started, and when it started, you were like, who is this person? How did he get here? What's going on? And by the end of the show, it looped back, I don't know, there's probably a name for that. Is there an opposite to foreshadowing? It's like post-shadowing. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's a literary term for it. But in the end, it brings you back to how that person got there, and that's kind of part of the episode. The way I read this, and again, this is just me after reading everything I've read and just reading this over and over and over again. What I think is that chapter 2 happened at some period before chapter 1 or 3. The spies going over, doing their thing. Because if they were to go over to Jericho, that's 10 miles, and they had to cross the river. And so you're looking at least half a day's journey, 4 or 5 hour journey, plus you add the river in there. They lodged there, meaning that they stayed there for some unspecified amount of time. Okay? And then they went and hid for 3 days. Then they had to make the couple-day journey back, or the at least one-day journey back, to the camp at Shittim. And so they were gone for, they also had to spy out the city, right? So they were gone at least a week. So that could not have happened in the 3-day period from chapter 1 to chapter 3. It just couldn't. It doesn't add up. I believe that happened before any of this, okay? Then I think we start with Joshua leaving Shittim in chapter 3. And then even chapter 1 all happened once they got to the camp at the Jordan. And again, it's because of that phrase, within 3 days, in chapter 1, you will pass over this Jordan, meaning this Jordan would say that it's right here, not that Jordan way over there that's 5 miles away. Okay? And so the way I see it is that chapter 3, verse 1, all of chapter 2 happened, then chapter 3, verse 1 happened, and then you have the conversation between God and Joshua. Then you have the conversation between the half tribe of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben there in chapter 1, and then the people responding to Joshua being made their leader. All that happened at the banks of the Jordan River. Therefore, at the end of 3 days in chapter 3, verse 2, it is those same 3 days that were mentioned in chapter 1. I'll stop there because, again, it can get very confusing. And honestly, it's kind of fruitless because it really doesn't take us anywhere other than it's something that I could really get hung up on. I think I hung up on it enough, judging by some of your expressions. So I'm going to leave it there. If you have another view of that, you can use up class time right now and tell us. Okay, you can tell me later. That's all right. Anyway, we'll zoom back in, find out where we are. Shittim is their camp. That's where they all stopped. And then they got to the Jordan, and that's only 5 miles, so that doesn't even take that long. That could have happened on that first day, even after he said within 3 days they could have headed on over to get there. But they are at the banks of the Jordan as we pick up here. Next thing I want to talk about is talking about the Ark of the Covenant. What was the significance and the role of the Ark of the Covenant throughout this chapter? So a couple of things that we find out. We find out that the first thing he said, and let me jump back over to here. In verse 2, at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp, commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant carried by the priest, then you get up and follow it. All right? That was the instruction. But don't follow it too close. You need to stay 2,000 cubits away, which is somewhere between a half a mile and 3/4 of a mile, if you take an 18-inch cubit. All right? So they have to stay that far back. Why the distance? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Why would they need to stay that far back from the ark? Now, obviously, you don't touch the Ark of the Covenant. We know that. We all watched Indiana Jones, and they couldn't even look at it. But obviously, it was exposed here. Maybe it was under a sheet, but it seems like it was not, so they could see it and identify it, and they see the guys walking with that. Why did they have to stay about a half a mile away from it? I think you're right. Yep. Yeah. So the answer is crowd control. I think that's probably the best answer. And the farther back people are, the more people can actually see it. Right? If you've got a kind of a column of people following this thing that's, I mean, who knows how wide it could have been. It could have been about 20 miles wide because once the water went back, it went up to the city of Adam that we read, and that was about 20 miles away from where they actually crossed. Probably wasn't that wide, but the wideness of that column of people can look ahead and see it, and they had to be able to see it because what they were told here is you have never been here before. You must be able to see the ark, and you must be able to follow the ark. So that kind of gives you the, I guess, the logistics of following the Ark of the Covenant and the command that it's going to walk past you, and then when you see it, that's when it's time to go. The function of the ark in this story is, you think about that, one, it is to lead the people, right? Follow it wherever it goes. You've never been here before, but follow it. What does the ark represent? It's the presence of God, right? What is not there anymore? It would be apparent that they're no longer following a column of cloud or a column of fire. So at this point, they are following the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is the place, that's the seat, the mercy seat that was there in the tabernacle. And so that indicated that was the presence of God. So you're following God, okay? God is going to go before his people. God is going to lead his people. And God is providing protection in a place of danger as they go into the river. God goes first, right? And and we'll talk about this here in a few minutes also, the Jordan River has become a symbol of death, right? When you cross over the Jordan, that means you've died. We sing songs about that. And so if that Ark of the Covenant is going into death first, does that make you think about the 23rd Psalm? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. It is protection from that river. It is protection during that crossing. And so they're following God. It's the presence of God, and God goes before them even into danger, even into death. Jesus went there for us as well. And so you see these parallels are going to keep popping up between this story and between the story of Jesus in the Gospels. Jesus died for us. Jesus died in our place so that we can enter into death with confidence. So some of the significance and the roles of the Ark of the Covenant, I think, is some of the interesting things that you can pull out of this reading. Anything else about the Ark of the Covenant that maybe popped up going through that? All right. Let's talk about, then, the actual parting of the waters. They get there to the brink of the Jordan River. Jordan River dropped in elevation over 1,000 feet. Now, I guess from the Sea of Galilee down to the Salt Sea, or the Dead Sea, it was 65 miles, I think. 165 miles or 65 miles. Either way, the way the river twists and turns and winds through the valley, the river actually runs over 200 miles. And being in a valley and being that elevation change, there are places in that river that are very dangerous. It probably ranges from about 90 feet wide to over 100 feet wide in some places. Probably 3 to 10 feet deep is what I read. So not super deep, but not the easiest river to cross, okay? And so it was a dangerous crossing. And then we get that little parentheses there. Where was it? In verse 16. And what did it tell us? Well, it flooded its banks during the harvest. And so now they're going into a river that's already dangerous, and it's flooding its banks. Now, this is April on the calendar. We know that when we get into chapter 4, we know that they crossed the river and ended up on the other side on the 10th of Nisan, which was their first month of the year. but that's in the spring. It was in April. And so some have questioned what kind of harvest was there in April. It seems kind of early in the season. Actually, the flax harvest would have happened already. If you remember, what did Rahab hide them under? She had flax that she had harvested and was drying on her roof, right? And so there was a harvest. And so this is this harvest time, and the river has overflowed its banks, making it even more dangerous. So they come up on this river. It mentioned a city named Adam. You can see that here, and it's about 20 miles north of where they crossed. Now, that city of Adam is known for giant mud cliffs, 150 feet high in some places. And there have been, in history that we've recorded, I think one was in 1927, that those mud cliffs, the big mudslide will happen and slide into the river and actually block the river, and the river will stop flowing. That's interesting. Some would tell you that a miraculous mudslide up around the city of Adam is what stopped this river from flowing, and that's why it stopped so far north. Doesn't take away from the miraculous nature of it if you believe that God caused that to happen. That's okay to explain it that way. No way to know that one way or the other. The other miraculous part is you remember that they stood on dry ground. So that cannot be explained by a mudslide 20 miles north. But if that's how God stopped the river, that's how God stopped the river. It's just another interesting thing about that. So there's some particulars about parting the waters of the Jordan when they're crossing. What was accomplished by the crossing of the Jordan River? What was accomplished? According to what we read, and don't overthink it, one thing is what? They went in the promised land, okay? Yes, the easy answer is normally the right answer. That's okay. But what else was accomplished? What did God say to Joshua? Today I will, what was that in verse 6 or 7? Verse 7, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they might know that I was with Moses and I will be with you. So in the parting of the waters, or the stopping of the waters of the Jordan River, God exalted Joshua. Now, he's already been named the leader. He's already been promoted. He's already been presented. They've recognized him. They said, whatever you say, we will do. Only be strong and courageous. All these conversations have already happened. But now, when they see this, God says, now they're going to know. Now they're going to know that this solidifies Joshua's place. It solidifies Joshua's place in the same way as Moses. Okay? He's going to be held in the same regard as Moses now. Moses, one who also parted a sea, a body of water, and now we're watching Joshua do the same thing. This is the way God said, I'm going to exalt you, and he demonstrated that to him. The verse before that, Joshua says, take up the Ark of the Covenant for the people, so they took it up. Let's see, maybe it's the verse after that. Yeah, verse 10, I'm sorry. Joshua said, here's how you shall know that the living God is among you. So a couple things it accomplished. One, they made it to the promised land. Two, it exalted Joshua, right? It said that Joshua confirmed, he is your leader. And then a third thing is it demonstrated to them, to the people, that God is with them. The living God is with you. Now, interesting thing though, you got to think about this group of people. Not many of them saw the Red Sea crossing, right? Only anybody 20 years old and younger. So that was, what, 60 years ago that happened for those folks. And so, I mean, even something that big and awesome, if it's a 40 or 50 or 60-year-old memory, there's going to be some cloudiness getting up in there, and you're going to remember it different or have a different story. Or if you're the Israelites, they kind of forgot about it about, a week after it happened, it seemed like. They just turned around and said, God's out here to kill us, even though they walked through the Red Sea. And so they've really never seen this before. And so for them to have heard the story of the Red Sea and known that about the Red Sea and talked to some of the people that did that, the people who were born while they're wandering for 40 years, and then they see it happen for them, then they know, one, they know that all the stories they heard before are true. 2, they know the same God that was with them, or with Moses and was with their ancestors, is with them as well. Compare and contrast the Red Sea and the Jordan. What are some similarities and differences between those two body of water crossings? Anything stand out? Mm-hmm. Sure. So in the Red Sea, it said they went through with 2 big walls of water on each side. We don't know how long it was or how wide it was. And here, the water seemed to have been drawn back up to Adam, and the other water flowed away. So if you saw that large wall of water, you only had one on one side. Yep. What else? What about the way it happened? How did Moses part the sea? He had a staff. Oddly enough, it was Aaron's staff. And there he stands. It was Aaron's staff, and he holds up the staff, and the staff does it right. Here, they're told that as soon as the priests put their foot in the water, it's going to part. So, different process. Doesn't change much, just different process. What else? I will say about that, if you are one of these priests and you've got a 280-pound box that's overlaid with solid gold, and it's on your shoulder, and you're walking down some rocky terrain, and it's probably a little bit muddy getting down to it, because remember, this river's in flood stage, and there's no telling what kind of limbs and branches and wildlife and rocks and everything else, and now you have to step down into, probably off some sort of bank, into the water. What kind of faith does it take to say, listen, as soon as you step on that water that's moving very quickly, and you can't see the bottom, right? You know what they say in a flood, never drive through water where you can't see the bottom. You know what's in there. But Joshua says, don't worry, guys, just take one step. That was a tough step to take, I would imagine. And again, you're holding the Ark of the Covenant. You're holding the mercy seat of God on your shoulders, 72 pounds each. And you just have to step in and hope it dries up. And hope you don't go, knee-deep into the mud. You ever walked on the bottom, like if you drain a lake and you walk in through it? You ever done that? I've done it. I was knee-deep. Both my shoes are gone. Still at the bottom of that lake, Phoenix City, Alabama. And so they don't know what they're stepping into. That's a lot of faith to step down into that. And it would be a very good opportunity to be kind of paralyzed with fear. And it kind of takes you back to be strong and courageous and to do the things that God has told them to do. Another difference, I guess, between the Red Sea and the Jordan crossing is when they crossed the Red Sea, they crossed from danger into safety, right? Here, they're crossing from safety into danger. They're going in to fight. They're going in to take over cities. They're going in to annihilate cities. That certainly is not going to be, they're going to be met with some resistance as they do that. So kind of an opposite here. They're going from safety to danger, whereas Moses took them from certain death into safety and killed their enemies along the way. I think that's pretty ironic that those two things are swapped up. Similarities, they both stood on dry ground. It said the water was ground, or the ground was dry. They did not walk through mud. And that might be about it. Anything else similar differences, compare, contrast? It's kind of interesting. It's interesting that the Exodus is kind of bookended by crossing over large bodies of water in a miraculous way. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. 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 Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's a great example. Adam, that's right. Yeah, and certainly no coincidences there. So I would repeat all that, but that was a lot. 12 tribes, 12 apostles, Jesus. Huh? 3 days. 3 days is very significant. That happens a lot. And so there's no, obviously, none of this is accidental. So anyway, well, it's 7:50. That's when I told him I'd stop. So I tell you what, let's do chapter 4 next week. We'll talk about the memorial stones. Very, very interesting having the memorial stone. 2 memorials, by the way. And so we'll pick up there. But we will leave them crossing on dry ground through the Jordan River, and we'll pick up in chapter 4 next week. All right? Thank you for your attention and your attendance, and y'all have a great rest of your week.